Four boys hike into an abandoned campground for a night of jokes and fireworks. But in the dark, the trails are wired, the pits are waiting, and an old man pushes a red bicycle between the trees. And if you hear him laugh, it's already too late.
What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my spookies. It's the last Wednesday before spooky season, and you know what that means. It's time for a little spooky in your weekly, but remember, next week, as we begin October, there'll be something spooky right here for you to listen to every single day. So make sure you're subscribed. You won't want to miss what we have in store. And speaking of, this Friday we have a brand new episode of Cutting Deep into Horror, where myself and Rachel Rodolphi talk about the ultimate experience in grueling terror, Evil Dead. So make sure to check that out this Friday. And if you love what we're doing here at Weekly Spooky and want to support us, there are two ways. The first is head to weeklyspooky.com/join, and for as little as $1 a month, you get 2 bonus episodes every month, as well as over 5 years of Creepypasta readings and exclusive audiobooks. That's weeklyspooky.com/join. Another way to make a big difference that doesn't cost a penny is go to your favorite podcasting app like Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a 5-star rating. It helps other spookies like you find out about the show. But now, as for tonight, imagine a campground closed for the season. No ranger, no rules, just the whisper of tires over pine needles and a smile full of summer teeth. One wrong step off the trail and the forest bites back. Tonight, my spookies, we'll follow flickers of firelight to a shack of plastic and tarps, where the screams are real, the wire is sharp, and the only safe place might be the one you never leave, your tent. We're heading into the woods to go camping right after this. The Old Man with the Red Bicycle by Bruce Haney. Come on, Mom, Kyle argued to his mother while she was in the kitchen trying to make dinner. Jeff and Tanner's parents are letting them go. Yeah, well, their parents are from the hands-off school of parenting. Didn't Jeff recently get suspended for mooning his teacher? Kyle tried not to laugh, but his brother, who was listening in the other room, couldn't help but chuckle. Matthew felt their eyes on him, and he tried to pretend like it was something on TV that had made him laugh. He had been listening to their conversation intently, worried because the plan was for Kyle to get permission to go, and then ask for permission to bring Matthew with him to camp at the old North Fork campground. The Parks Department built a nicer campground up the road with a boat ramp and a general store. Technically, the old site was no longer open for camping, but there was no ranger there to enforce it. Therefore, no fees. So it became the go-to spot to camp for the thrifty. He was excited by the idea of camping with the big kids. He always looked up to his brother and always tried to impress the older kids with his knowledge of pop culture. while kids his age were still listening to Crisscross and watching Power Rangers, he was listening to Nirvana and watching Beavis and Butthead. "The answer is no," their mother said. "But Dad said it was okay if you said it was okay," Kyle pleaded. She sighed, letting her frustration be known, but said nothing else, and neither did Kyle. He was the king of parental manipulation, and he knew when it was time to shut his mouth. Matthew didn't understand the subtleties of getting your way with parents, so he thought it was all over. "I'll set the table," Kyle said softly, being careful to show a bit of disappointment in his voice without revealing any anger. Matthew looked bummed when he entered the room, but Kyle gave him a sly smile, then spoke to their mother again. "Hey, Mom?" She didn't sigh this time, but her tone let him know she was still ready to fight. "Yes, Kyle?" Kyle pretended not to notice her tone and responded in an upbeat way. "I just remembered. I never got around to showing you my report card." Matthew watched in wonder as his brother manipulated their mother, and by the time dinner was set, he had received permission to go camping, and before they were done with the meal, he had approval to bring Matthew. He sold them on the fact that watching his brother would help keep him out of trouble. Matthew was ecstatic. Kyle, Matthew, Jeff, and Tanner all piled into Jeff's dad's old Buick wagon for the drive out to the woods. The three 15-year-olds sat in the back of the giant wagon. They made Matthew sit in front with Jeff's dad, Jerry, who told him story after story about all the big fish he caught out of the lake they were heading to. Matthew just listened, as he had no fishing stories to tell of his own, and was still a bit nervous around adults. Plus, Jerry wasn't leaving much room for him to be involved in the conversation. As the boys set up their tents, they showed each other all the neat stuff they brought along. Matthew had books, and Kyle had a semi-crushed pack of cigarettes that had 3 left. "Stole them from my father. There's one for each of us," he said. "There are 4 of us," Matthew argued. "Like I'm going to let my baby brother smoke. I'm only 3 years younger than you. It's not like I'm a toddler." "I'll let you take a drag," Jeff said. "No, you won't," Kyle replied. "Let the kids smoke," Tanner added. "Drop it." Tanner looked to Jeff, who shrugged his shoulders and changed the subject. "Wait until you see what I brought," Jeff said. They all looked at his bag as he pulled out a thick handful of fireworks. Matthew noticed the dirty magazine that was underneath it. "Bottle rockets," Kyle said. "Rematch?" Tanner asked. "Rematch?" Matthew asked, but with concern. "Bottle rocket war," Kyle said to Matthew, as if that explained everything. Their camping spot wasn't that far from the parking lot, so they saw people throughout the day, walking past on the trail behind them. Every time they heard someone, either stepping on a branch or talking, they would look to see who it was. If it happened to be a girl, the older boys would gawk at her. They might be skilled at understanding their parents enough to manipulate them, but with strangers, they never seemed to notice if the attention they were giving was wanted or not. So they stared blatantly. Matthew hoped that they weren't building up material for the old Spank Bank. He knew they all did what Beavis and Butthead called choking the chicken, because he once overheard two older girls talking with disgust about how all guys jerk off. When he heard that, Matthew swore to himself that he would be the one guy who didn't pull his pud. He would wait until he found a girl who was nice enough to pull it for him. The older boys were only interested in the girls who walked by, so they only gave a slight glance to the old man with the beat-up red bicycle. But Matthew was interested and found himself gawking. The man must have been in his late 60s. His clothes looked old and worn, and his gray hair was unkempt, as was his beard, which looked like it needed to be washed. There were bits of what Matthew imagined was dried food in it. The bicycle appeared to be old to Matthew as well, and it looked like it had been painted over many times. Whoever painted it last took no care, as the frame wasn't the only thing red. So was the crank, and even the wheels had spots of overspray. He wondered if it had been stolen. When the old man spotted Matthew looking at him, he gave a slight smile and squinted his eyes to get a better look. Matthew made an audible yelp, which made the old man laugh, revealing what he heard his dad call summer teeth. Summer there, summer not. His laughter attracted the attention of the other boys, but the old man sensed this and turned his head away from Matthew before their eyes fell on him, and continued walking his beat-up old bicycle as he chuckled to himself.
Don't go away. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
After everything was set up, they went for a walk. Where they started on the path was well beaten down, with bark dust over it, and wide enough for 3 of the boys to walk next to each other, leaving Matthew to take up the rear, which was okay. Right now they were talking about girls, a topic Matthew wasn't too knowledgeable about. "Yeah, well, I think Beth has the largest fun bags in school," Jeff said. "That might be true, but she's still a goody two-shoes," Tanner joked. "She's nice. I sit next to her in science class," Kyle said. "Yeah? How nice? She lets you touch them sweater puppies?" Jeff asked. "Only when Mr. Hall is looking the other way," Kyle joked. "Yeah?" Tanner asked. "Of course not, you idiot," Kyle said. "She's just nice to me and is wicked smart. Maybe you need to see if she could tutor you at home," Tanner said, while mock kissing the air and holding his hands out like he was kneading dough. They all laughed. Matthew gave a nervous chuckle. "She doesn't stack up to that girl in the bikini who walked past our tent earlier, though," Tanner said. "Which girl?" Jeff asked. "You know which girl. The one who looked like she was smuggling oversized watermelons under her bikini top?" Jeff asked. "Jeez," Kyle said. "You guys exaggerate. Don't get me wrong, they were big, but they were more like cantaloupes, which is a totally respectable fruit, size-wise, to be compared to." Even Matthew laughed at that one. "If we weren't busy setting up the tent, I would have made a move." "No, you wouldn't have," Kyle replied. "Sure I would have. That chick was like 30 years old. She doesn't want anything to do with your 15-year-old jailbait Batman undies covered ass." They all laughed, but Matthew laughed the loudest. He loved his brother getting in a good one. "She was the hottest girl to walk past," Jeff said. "I keep thinking about that old man with the red bike that passed by," Matthew added. "More your type?" Jeff teased. The older boys all laughed. "Sorry, bro," Kyle said. "That was a good one." It took Matthew a second for his confidence to recover, to follow up. "Do you think he lives out here?" "He could," Kyle said. "Do you think he traps animals to eat like an old mountain man?" Matthew asked. "I think he traps little boys," Tanner said, "for food and other purposes." As they continued down the trail, it became so thin and overgrown that they had to walk in a line. Kyle was in the lead. "We might be heading to his place. Look at the ground." They all looked down at the path they were walking on. It could hardly be called a walking trail at this point. It was so thin, and there were no footprints, just an indented bicycle trail that led through a clearing, which the boys decided was perfect for what they had planned. When they arrived at the clearing, Jeff pulled off his backpack and started handing out bottle rockets to everybody. "You ready to get your butt whooped?" Kyle asked. "Yeah, right. Remember whose butt got kicked last time?" Jeff replied. "What's with all the butt talk, my guys?" Tanner inquired. They all laughed. Jeff pulled out a handful and gave them to Matthew. "He's not playing," Kyle said. "Fine, more for me," Jeff said, and snatched them back and took off to get into position. "That's not fair," Kyle yelled after him, as Jeff found the biggest tree to hide behind. Matthew was glad that his brother did what he did. He had no interest in getting hit with a bottle rocket, or hitting anyone else, for that matter. Instead, he found a large tree outside the field to sit behind. He pulled out the newest Goosebumps book, Welcome to Camp Nightmare. His mother had gotten him a subscription since he was her little reader. He tried to ignore the sound of bottle rockets whizzing around, the laughs, and the occasional yelp, followed by laughter as one of them was hit. He was pretty good at ignoring them, but he couldn't disregard the sound he heard further up the trail. He looked behind to see that the 15-year-olds were still busy, then headed forward a bit to see if he could figure out what the noise was. When he got to the top of the hill, he looked back one last time at the older kids who didn't notice that he had left. Down the hill, he could see by the red bicycle leaning against a structure that it looked like it was made from garbage bags and part of a frayed tarp. That is when he saw the old man again. The old man took a break from slaughtering the raccoon that was on the felled tree that he was using as a makeshift table. He waved at Matthew and smiled big, showing off his summer teeth again. It made him think of his dad's other phrase, summer green, summer yellow. The pain he suddenly felt in his leg was tremendous. It felt like the whole thing was vibrating. "I got him!" Jeff yelled. "You asshole!" Kyle said as he ran to his brother, furious that Jeff shot his brother in the leg with a bottle rocket. As Matthew began to cry, he looked back down and watched as the old man grabbed the raccoon carcass and headed in to his tent.
You're not safe yet. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
It wasn't until they were back at camp, making dinner, that they finally got Matthew to agree not to tell any of their parents. It did take a bit of convincing that included a candy bar and his choice of any image to rip out and take from the Hustler magazine that Jeff had brought. He didn't pick the most lurid. He just picked the one with the girl who had punk rock hair. After that, the night was filled with roasting hot dogs, s'mores, and telling jokes that none of their parents would have been okay with them hearing, let alone telling. All was good until they went to sleep that night. The tent was barely illuminated by a cheap battery-operated lantern. Before Matthew put his head down, he looked at the magazine page one last time before folding it and putting it between the pages of the world's record book he had brought along. "Kyle? Yeah? I really wasn't going to tell Mom and Dad about the bottle rocket." Kyle smiled. "I know. Are you sure you're all right?" Kyle asked. "It doesn't hurt anymore," Matthew said. "Jeff's a prick." "I know," Kyle responded. "Listen to that language, only hanging out with us for a day, and look how far you've fallen." "Fuck you," Matthew said, and laughed. "Good night," Kyle said, and turned off their lantern. Matthew woke hours later to the sound of their tent being zipped closed. He rolled over to check if his brother was still there. He was. He then reached over for the lamp, but it was gone. He shook his brother awake. What's happening?" Kyle said. "I just heard somebody messing with the zipper of the tent, and now I can't find the lamp." "I'm sure it's right here." Kyle felt around. "The fuck? My bag is gone. It had my flashlight." Matthew felt around in the darkness, including the side pocket on the tent wall and the floor, discovering his light was missing, as well as all his other belongings. "All my stuff is gone. My bag, my book," Matthew said. Kyle began to laugh. "What?" "Those assholes," Kyle said. "What are you talking about? Jeff must be mad that you got one over on him. Getting that magazine page must have really pissed him off." "You think? What else could it be? Come on, let's go fuck with them back," Kyle said, while grabbing Matthew's hand to get him up. When they left the tent, they realized just how incredibly dark it was. "I can't see anything," Matthew said. "No light pollution out this far." Matthew accepted and understood this new concept. Kyle held Matthew's hand to where the other tent should have been. "Where are they?" Matthew asked. "Man, they are cleverer than I thought." "What?" Kyle asked. "They took all our stuff, including our lights, and then moved their tent, knowing we would have to stumble around in the dark to find them." "What do we do now?" "They want us to look for them. Let's not give them the satisfaction. Let's go back to bed, like it doesn't even bother us." They got back in the tent and tried to sleep, but that's when they heard a loud noise in the distance. Outside, the old man stood on a large rock, impatiently. He expected the other two to come and look for their friends. He had been looking forward to this game of hide and seek that he had orchestrated. Of course, they wouldn't be happy when they found their friends. He wondered which one they would find first. He expected it would be the one that was still alive, since he would be the one making the most noise. They were supposed to both be sliced up, but alive and tied to trees. But when the one woke up prematurely to the dose of heroin he had given them, well, he had to stop the screaming somehow. The goal was to cut the windpipe, but instead, he hit the jugular vein. But what did he know about biology anyhow? His knowledge of human anatomy didn't come from any book learning. He was surprised that the other one hadn't woken up yet. He had his fun with the other boys as well, using the Swiss Army knife that he found in the kid's back pocket. The blade was dull as hell, but with enough pressure, he was able to cut him up pretty good. He gave him a face only a mother could love, as the saying goes. Of course, his mother had never loved the man or his face, but she had been dead for decades at this point, so who cared? The boy was tied up far from the campsite, but when he woke up, he screamed loud enough that the old man could hear it, which meant the boys could hear it as well. He had been up for hours and had been living in the woods for years, so his eyes were well adapted to the dark. He watched their tent because years ago he had made a rule that once the night's events started, if the second group stayed in the tent, they would survive the night. He would let them be. But throughout his travels, he had set this scenario up a half a dozen times, and nobody had stayed in the tent, and nobody had survived the night.
Shh, it was only the wind. You're safe. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
So when the boys left the tent to investigate the shrieks, there was just one question. How will they die? From one of the booby traps, or by his own hands? Before walking back to his shack, he watched to see if they were going to take the main path. If they did, they would be in for a lot of trouble. He smiled when they did. Now, he thought, he must get back to the shack and keep his living noisemaker sounding off to make sure they came in a hurry. If there's one thing he learned, it's that people are less cautious when they're in a hurry. "What's happening?" Matthew asked. "I don't know." They heard Jeff yell again, so they sped up. Thankfully, Matthew was on the husky side, which made him a little slower, so it was only Kyle who ran ankle first into the razor wire, causing him to fall forward to the ground. His head just barely missed the sharp rocks that had been placed there. If he were a couple inches taller, his head would have some new holes in it. Matthew moved towards his brother. "Stop!" Kyle yelled as he got up. "There's a trap!" Kyle checked his legs. They were bleeding, but his sleep pants were absorbing most of the blood. Matthew squinted as he approached and inspected the razor wire, which appeared to be homemade, using cut-up soda cans. "Kyle, what do we do?" Matthew asked his big brother. Kyle thought about going back and getting out of there. He had the life of his brother to think about, after all. Back at the shack, the old man used thick gloves and a large pair of pliers to hold some old rusty logging cable he had found into the fire. Once it was glowing red hot, he touched it to Jeff's exposed torso. The sound they heard coming from their friend was enough to quell all of Kyle's thoughts about turning around. "Matthew, go back to the main road and try to get a ride. I can't leave you two behind, even if he shot me with a bottle rocket." "It is Jeff screaming, isn't it?" Kyle said rhetorically, while wondering what happened to Tanner. When they came to another line of soda can razor wire, they decided to walk through the woods along the main path in hopes of avoiding any further booby traps. Doing so saved them from a few well-placed bear traps as well. What it didn't save them from was the sight of Tanner's mutilated body, tied to a tree just off the main path. Back at the shack, the old man smiled as he heard their screams of shock. "They must have found your other friend's dead body." "You asshole!" Jeff yelled. "Oh, did I neglect to tell you that?" "Yep, I done killed your buddy." Jeff slumped his head down. "Should I heat the wire again?" Jeff shook his head no. "Or should I just—" the old man began to say as he stuck his finger through one of the holes he cut in Tanner's face. The pain was intense, and every nerve in his body was yelling for him to cry out. But instead, he used that energy to bite down on his finger. A few punches to the skull from the old man's other bony hand were enough to stop that behavior. The old man then looked at his finger, moved it around, and watched as blood dripped heavily from it. "You're lucky it ain't broke." Then he kicked the kid in the leg before heading to his garbage bag shack, mumbling, "You son of a bitch." Inside, he poured the kids' backpacks out and dug through the contents until he found a nice little first aid kit. "Must be Boy Scouts," he mumbled to himself as he used the kit to fix up his wound. The sight of Tanner's mutilated body was not enough to stop Kyle and Matthew as they continued towards where the screaming had come from. "I can smell a fire," Kyle said. "We're getting close." "What's the plan when we get there? We have no weapons." Kyle looked around. "I guess we both need to find a big stick. I wish you would go back to the main road. You saw what he did to Tanner." Kyle looked around until he found said big stick, then handed it to Matthew. He brandished it to show his brother he was ready for battle. A few yards later, Kyle found a stick for himself. "I wish we had grabbed some of that razor wire to wrap around these." As they made their way, they began to feel comfortable walking in the woods. It wasn't like he could booby trap the whole forest. It made sense that it would just be on the main trail. "Wait!" Kyle yelled, as Matthew stepped onto a spot that looked off to him. While much of the ground had a stray leaf here or there, or some moss, this spot was thick with both. But it was too late. Matthew's foot had made contact, and the ground gave way.
More scares to come. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
His body fell through. The cries his brother made brought him back to when they were younger. Matthew had only been 4 at the time, but already looked up to his older brother. So, when he saw Kyle slide down the stairwell railing, he just had to do it too. But while Kyle made it down without a scratch, Matthew fell off, halfway down. His crying sounds were beyond anything he had ever heard. A broken arm and a cracked skull will do that. It was so loud that he ran out of the room, then out of the house. Thankfully, his mother was home, and she called the ambulance while Kyle hid, embarrassed and scared that his brother might die. But he did not run this time. "Matthew!" Kyle yelled as he got on his belly to reach down to pull his brother out of the hole, wishing again that he had a flashlight. The trap was about 5 feet deep and was full of various bits of sharp materials that the old man pilfered from an old garbage dump. There were old rusty cans, broken bottles, and a pitchfork without a handle. If it had been a few more feet deep, or the items a bit more well placed, he very easily could have been killed. Kyle desperately tried to pull him out. Matthew's state of panic made it much harder of a task, but he finally got him out. "Are you okay?" Kyle asked, but his brother was still crying out, so he used his hand to search for damage. He found places that were bleeding, but nothing serious. "My foot!" Matthew yelled. Kyle's hands darted to the appendage to find that something sharp was sticking out of the top of it. So he felt the other side. It was a nail through a piece of wood. Okay, Kyle said, freaking out. "This is going to hurt. It will, but I am going to pull the board and nail out." "Don't!" Matthew pleaded. "I have to." "Why did I have to go camping?" Matthew yelled. Kyle didn't wait for another response. He grabbed hold of the board and yanked in one swift motion. But the rotted piece of old wood broke into pieces, leaving the nail still firmly secured in his foot. Matthew writhed on the ground as Kyle tried to get hold of his foot. After fighting it for what felt like forever, he was able to grab his leg and shove it between his arm and his body. He held it tight against himself while he worked to pull the nail out. He never thought of blood as a lubricant, but because of all of it on his hands and the nail, he couldn't get a grip and kept slipping. But each time he pulled, he was able to get it a little further out. It was on the second pull that the sharp point protruding from the top slid back into the foot. Then, on the fourth yank, it came back out of the bottom. The old man never expected anybody to make it this far, so there was only one trap left. As they crept forward at a snail's pace, in fear of setting off another life-threatening trick, Matthew's outstretched hand made contact with a braided wire. "Stop!" Matthew said, as he slowly pulled his hand back. "What?" Kyle asked. "Tripwire," Matthew said. Kyle took his stick and hit the ground underneath it. It felt solid, so they got on their bellies and climbed underneath the wire. It should have taken only a minute more to get to the shack, but with their cautious pace, it took another 4 before they were at the top of the hill, looking down on the old man's shack, where they could see the old man holding something in the fire, then pulling it out and pressing it to Jeff's chest. "Motherfucker!" Matthew yelled, loud enough to be heard over all the noise Jeff was making as the hot metal burned his skin. The old man was shocked to see that they made it as far as they did, so much that he dropped the pliers and hot steel on Jeff's foot. His screams were ignored as the old man watched as Kyle and Matthew held their clubs up and ran downhill towards him. His self-preservation outweighed his shock. He grabbed the machete he had tucked away. They saw it, but it didn't matter. What he had done to Tanner was fresh in their minds, and now Jeff. And after what they had gone through, all they thought about was revenge. Matthew was the first to attack when he swung his wooden club at the old man, hitting him in the stomach. He responded by aiming his blade at Matthew's head. Before it could make contact, Kyle slammed his club against the hand that held the blade with enough force that they all heard the crunching sound of multiple bones breaking in his aged hand. The blade dropped as his hand no longer had the structure left to hold it. Matthew followed this up with a hard swing into the ribs. The old man heaved as he tried to take a breath, but couldn't. Kyle hit him again, this time in the right arm. The old man thought about his situation and decided to run, despite the lack of air in his lungs.
If you thought that was scary, just you wait. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
Kyle grabbed Matthew and whispered a plan of action in his ear, and then they took off. Matthew was on his left side, and Kyle took the right. The old man had been easy to keep up with, but neither attempted to overtake him. "Aren't you two gonna untie me?" Jeff yelled after them. Kyle began to approach the old man and pushed him towards the woods. Matthew moved in further to accommodate, leading the old man right where they wanted him. To the booby trap they were able to pass without setting off. The old man realized this and stopped, just short of the tripwire. So Matthew pushed him forward and watched as a wooden block with nails fell down from the trees, heading right for the old man, who ducked. "You can't get me with my own trick. You can't." The old man's speech was cut short when the block hit him as it swung back. The momentum wasn't quite as much as the first swing, but at least 3 nails punctured through his skin, 2 of which stopped at the skull, but 1 punctured through. This didn't stop him, no. The old man found a second wind from panic and self-preservation. He ran, but the block stuck to his head, and for one moment he was like a dog on a leash, thrashing about until finally it popped out of his skull, and he took off. Kyle and Matthew followed and continued to push him toward the next trap, the pit. Not the most lethal, but it was worth a shot. Unfortunately, the old man was hip to it and leaped over. That's when Matthew decided to push him into the unknown. back on the unexplored part of the main trail, the part they went around. For a few 100 yards they ran without coming across anything. At first they had just been keeping pace, but the old man was picking up speed, and they had to increase theirs to catch up with him. Because of that, they were less cautious, and Kyle tripped over a few of the ill-placed big rocks the old man had set earlier. Kyle tumbled head over feet, smacking his skull several times on the ground. The old man turned around while keeping his pace to look and laugh, which was to be his downfall, because his laughter was the last thing they heard before a large snapping sound, followed by the old man screaming. He had stepped in his own bear trap. Matthew smiled at this, and without even taking a moment to help his brother up, he walked to the old man and beat him within an inch of his life by smashing the wooden stick across his skull repeatedly. Then he thought about all the torture they went through and beat him an inch more. After killing the old man, Matthew tried to help his brother up, but he couldn't walk. His leg was broken. So he went and untied Jeff. He was worse for wear, but among the two of them, they were able to drag Matthew back to the campsites. The first site they came to happened to be one of the young ladies whom the other boys had been ogling. After being told what happened and seeing what condition the boys were in, she and her friends helped them get to her little red 91 Honda Civic hatchback and raced them to town. The boys were young, and because of that, their bodies healed to nearly 100%, except for the scars, which Jeff had the worst of. All three of the survivors attended the funeral for their fallen friend Tanner. There, they vowed to each other that they would never go camping again. And that, my spookies, is why you should always stay on the main trail and maybe think twice before trusting an old man on a red bicycle. So sleep tight, don't trip any snares, and remember, sometimes the scariest monsters don't need fangs or claws, just a set of summer teeth and a laugh that follows you in the dark. I hope you enjoyed that story as much as I did, and I do want to remind you, Mr. Bruce Haney himself, the author of tonight's story, has a novella that will be premiering in October for your listening pleasure, completely free to the weekly spooky listeners. So make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app, and while you're at it, if you haven't already, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really does make a difference in bringing new listeners to enjoy the spooky. And if you want to support the spooky in a very direct way and get bonus episodes, exclusive audiobooks, and so much more, head to weeklyspooky.com/join for as little as $1 a month. And speaking of, I want to say an extra special thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names at the end of the show. And they are Johnny Nix, Kate and Lulu, Jessica Fuller, Mike Eschewey, Jenny Green, Amber Hansford, Karen Ouimet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you guys so much. And if you want to hear your name at the end of the show as well, just head to weeklyspooky.com/join and select a tier at the $15 a month or higher. It really helps the show a lot, and now is the best time ever to sign up and join over 90 other spookies in getting those bonus shows. And a whole lot more. But now it's time for me to get back to work. There is so much to do to get ready for October. I'll see you guys Friday on Cutting Deep. For myself, for my executive producers Rob Fields and Bobbletopia.com, my producer Dan Wilder, and my composer Ray Mattis, I'll see you out camping. Later.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.